I've had this strange ability ever since I was a kid. I used to ask my parents about it, but they never seemed to see what I was talking about. No matter who I asked, they always looked at me funny and told me what an overactive imagination I had. None of them seemed to see what I could see, and I quickly learned not to bring it up. It's hard not to bring it up, though, when you're surrounded by it all the time. You see, I could see the connections between people. The people who believed me always asked what it was like, but it's honestly hard to explain. It's not really a string, but that's the closest thing I can come to describing it. Think of a small, colorful string that attaches you to someone else, something unbreakable that ordinary people pass through without interrupting it. I learned in high school that there were certain people I had to avoid because the number of strings attached to them would make my head hurt. There was a girl, one of the super popular girls that every high school seems to have, who almost glowed with the number of strings and cords that came off of her and moved in every direction. She was a glowing ball of reds and greens and blues and yellows and oranges, and if I looked at her for too long, I would develop the worst migraine as I tried to follow all those different strings. The different colors tell you everything you need to know about someone. The red string was for love, but could also be for infatuation or just plain old lust. In high school, I would often use these colors to tell my friends when people liked them, which kicked many of them off into unwise relationships. Don't get me wrong, a few of them used this information to craft wonderful relationships, even marriages, but it led to my friend Tyler to date a girl who went on to stalk him for years to come. Blue strings were for friendship, something that often helped me find friends and see the connections between others, something I used to make friends with people by befriending their friends. Green was for envy, orange was for hate, and yellow was for deception. I used this information to help alleviate some rather hectic situations in my life, and it kept me out of trouble more often than not. As a young person in high school, however, the red string was the one that mattered the most to me. Like all teens, I was a bundle of hormones and emotions that were constantly at odds with each other. I wanted a girlfriend, a companion, someone to be with me and make me feel wanted. I wanted a lover who would state my sexual desires, something I was also very aware of. Like all adolescents, these desires were often at odds, and they sometimes thwarted each other. Girls who wanted to sleep with me were often pushed away by my appearance of being clingy. Girls who wanted a relationship were often pushed away by my supposed want for only one thing. I became frustrated, and some of this was spurred on by the fact that I could see the strings. You see, I only approached girls who presented a connection to me by that tried and true red string. The darker the red, the more they liked you, and I have watched that string glow lighter and lighter again and again before finally falling off as I drive them away with my wearing desires. Sometimes I think the strings actually hurt me, making me confident but also making me sure that I couldn't mess it up. I would stumble into these encounters and ultimately be pushed aside when my behavior or cockiness ultimately drove them away. Until one day, when I woke up to find a heartstring. I've told you about the red strings, but heartstrings were a little different. They were as red as arterial blood, and they only connected people who were meant to be together. Normally, they took time to build, but sometimes you would see two people connected by a heartstring who had yet to meet. When you hear of love at first sight, this is what they're talking about, and they are extremely rare. I woke up one morning, about 2 weeks after my 17th birthday, to find a heartstring leading out of my bedroom. I was confused at first. After the last girl I had clumsily run off with my careless teen advances, she told others at school that I was a creep. Now many female students would no longer talk to me. I hadn't seen a red string in nearly 3 months, so to suddenly wake up with a blood red string was unthinkable. I had no girlfriend, didn't even have any female friends that would speak to me, and now suddenly, I could see this heartstring protruding from my chest and stretching out into the world. I took everything I had to eat from some breakfast, get dressed, and shoulder my bag so I can head to school. I just knew it was going to be a great day. I followed the red string on my normal route. I believed it was someone at school, so it seemed the best way to find them. I had no reason to doubt this. School held most of the people my age that I knew. It could be someone new, someone who had been sick and didn't know about the rumors that circulated, or even someone who had found themselves smitten with me despite the rumors. I remember forming a picture of them in my mind, this homunculus becoming an amalgamation of the things I liked in a partner. Green eyes, straight black hair, glasses, a little on the chubby side, an easy smile, and so on and so on and so on. When the string diverted, going into town instead of towards my school, I stopped and looked anxious. The string was heading into the business district, and I could hear the bell ringing nearby, letting me know that I had about 5 minutes to get to class before I was late. I had been dragging my feet, daydreaming all the way to school, and the deviation was not something I had planned for. Did I go to the school and hope the person was also running late, or did I go looking for what could have very well be the love of my life? What if they were only in town for a few hours? What if I missed this chance forever because I was too scared to break a rule? As the bell for class echoed out, I turned and headed into town. I was already late. What was a little longer? I followed the string up to the streets, my tennis shoes slapping against the pavement as I, again, slipped into a daydream about who I was going to meet. Maybe she was a homeschooled girl who was out with her parents. Maybe they were traveling, and our meeting would spark a long-distance relationship that would become something closer later. Maybe my adolescent mind fantasized it was an older woman who would be taken with me and begin a secret romance. Not too much older, of course. In my mind, she would be 19 or 20, maybe even 21, and someone who would take me to parties and concerts and buy me beer as we fell into a whirlwind romance. Teens never think these things through, though, doing most of their thinking with what's below the belt, and my excitement built with every step I took. The string led me through the business district, and when it led me towards the industrial park, I stopped and glanced around. Who would be waiting here for me? Was it take your daughter to work day at some factory? If I got caught in there, I would be in big trouble. Hell, I could have even been in trouble if the truancy officer had caught me walking the streets during school hours. I looked back towards the school, thinking it might be some time to head back. If I left now, I would only be a little late. Only in a little trouble. I might miss first period, but I could still get to my other classes, making up some excuse for what had taken me so long. I looked back at the smoking factory that lay across the street, shaking my head as I walked towards it. I would feel at the time that this was an experience too important to miss. I wish now that I had. I might have kept my innocence. I skirted the factory, getting some looks from men with lunch pails and men in ties, but the string didn't lead me there. I walked past the shiny office park, some construction firm or another, but the string led me past that as well. I walked past a concrete plant, a shipping depot, and stopped again as I came even with a long warehouse of unknown purpose. I was looking at a broken and derelict building that had once been a manufacturer of some kind of computer parts. The windows were broken eyes that stared out onto the sidewalk, and the doors hung open like the waiting mouth of a carnival funhouse. I did not want to go into that building, but that was where my string was leading me. I took one hesitant step after another as I approached the husk. I was inside before I started noticing the drops of blood on the floor. The string was trailing the drops like a dutiful hound, and I felt less and less sure that I wanted to know who or where it was taking me. Who would I find in here? Why would they possibly be the love of my life? Was I meant to save them from something? My mind treated me to some sort of hero fantasy where I could come across my love being menaced by a killer and know just what to do in order to save her life. She would have fled him after he cut her, hence the blood, and I would arrive just in time to save her life, but not before I knocked the villain out with a pipe and proved that I was a real man who could protect her. It's funny the gymnastics our brains go through sometimes. The blood drops led to a stairwell that went down into the shadowy underbelly of the building. The blood droplets didn't look too bad, maybe a bloody nose or a slight cut, and I took out my phone and then used the light to follow them. I tried to be quiet, but I knew that my footsteps had to be nearly as loud as my breathing. A mixture of ragged fear and hesitant excitement. When I peeked around the edge of the stairwell, I could see the hulking machinery that had once probably kept this place running. Generators, old equipment, broken furniture, they all looked like monsters waiting to jump out and get me. But as I stood shivering in the near darkness, I heard something that reminded me of my purpose. A liquid-filled cough came from the back of the basement. I snuck in, my shoes grinding on the sand and broken glass as I made my way towards them. The basement had little windows at street level, and the light that came in illuminated everything but the darker areas. The soup in between the machines was permeable only by my phone light, and I checked them as I went for hiding beasts waiting to ambush me. I heard a wet, racking cough and sped up a little, not wanting to be too late to save her in my caution. She was waiting for me, and I didn't want to let her down. She was at the end, her body in a beam of sunlight as she lay dying. She was a mess. Her clothes had been ripped and torn, parts of her on display that had certainly been part of my fantasies, though never like this. She had been about my age, 16 or 17, but I didn't know her. She was leaking blood from dozens of wounds on her face and chest, and her arms looked like ripped open Christmas packages as they hung in bloody spatters. She was leaking other things too, and it was pretty clear that killing her hadn't been enough for him. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion as I approached her, and I told her that I wasn't going to hurt her as I took my phone out and dialed 911. As the operator picked up, though, a shadow fell across us, and I suddenly looked up to see someone looking down from the window at street level. He had clearly placed her here so he can get one more look before leaving, and I saw him in profile now, though the sun made his features hard to tell. He was an adult, or maybe a really big teen, and he was wearing a ball cap and a jumpsuit that zipped up. There was a logo on the jumpsuit, but I didn't have time to read it before he just took off towards wherever he was going. The operator called out to ask if I was there. I quickly gave her my information and told her where we were and what was happening. I gave her the best description of the guy that I could, and when the girl's hand tried to fumble into mine, I took it and squeezed reassuringly. I wanted to let her know that she had to hold on, that she would be important to me, and that she had to stay alive, because we had so much more to experience together. In my mind, I could already see her recovering as I stayed by her side, the two of us bonding over her trauma. I would be the man who had saved her, and as she healed, I would be there for her. I'd be by her side when they caught the guy, giving her my strength as she sat in court. We'd be married, we'd have children of our own, and we'd protect them against people like that. And one day, we'd grow old together, and I looked down and saw the string fall apart, the filaments unraveling as she took her last breath and died in that place. I also saw something I had never seen before, something I would see more often than I wanted after that day. A black string, midnight cord that seemed to undulate with want, that stretched out the window into the man who had severed my heartstring. It seemed I had lost my love, but gained something far more intimate. I didn't know what it meant, but that black string filled me with dread. I was still contemplating it when the police arrived.